Well, we've made it to question 7 of Prima Secunda of the Summa Theologia, and this is in the treatise on human acts, acts peculiar to man. As we talked about yesterday, these are things that are proper to man as agents with free will, and we are pursuing happiness. It's hard to understand this part of the Summa without having already read and studied the first part of the Summa, because that has to do with what our happiness is. Our happiness is beatitude, and beatitude is God. It's the perfection of the intellectual creature. And so, as now he gets into more of the nitty-gritty of the very actions that are conducive to our happiness, he is going to talk in these 4 articles. It's pretty quick. This will be probably a pretty short video compared to what we've had the last week and a half or so. The circumstances of human acts. So when we do an action, when we make a moral decision, there's always circumstances that play a part of that, but how do the circumstances influence the overall right or wrong of the action itself? So that's what he has in his mind here. And the first article says whether a circumstance is an accident of a human act. Now remember, as he'll explain here, an accident is something that is not part of the substance, but is added onto it. The fact that I have brown hair and that I'm 5'8" and that I have white skin, these are all accidental qualities to who I am. And if any of those changed, it wouldn't change my human nature. It wouldn't change the essence of what I am. So those are accidents, right? He says, since according to the philosopher, words... Now, I just want to say this is interesting because this first paragraph, he gets into kind of like a philosophy of language. It's very interesting. It's not going to be until the short second paragraph that he really gets into the answer of this, but I find this interesting. Okay, so I apologize for the pause there. He says, according to the philosopher, words are the signs of what we understand. It must needs be that in naming things we follow the process of intellectual knowledge. Now, our intellectual knowledge proceeds from the better known to the less known. Accordingly, with us, names of more obvious things are transferred so as to signify things less obvious. Okay, so he's not really answering the question yet, but he's getting there, right? And hence it is that, as stated in Metaphysics 4, which is Aristotle's, the notion of distance has been transferred from things that are apart locally to all kinds of opposition, and in like manner words that signify local movement are employed to designate all other movements, because bodies which are circumscribed by place are best known to us, and hence it is that the word circumstance has passed from located things to human acts. So really what he's done in this first paragraph is he's analyzed the word circumstance itself, and I find that interesting because Thomas's mind is so brilliant. And so now in this short paragraph here, he's going to give us the answer to this. He says, in things located, that is in things located, that is said to surround something which is outside it, but touches it or is placed near it. Accordingly, whatever conditions are outside the substance of an act and yet in some way touch the human act are called circumstances. Now, what is outside a thing's substance while it belongs to a thing is called an accident, wherefore the circumstances of human acts should be called their accidents. Now, we probably could have just had that little paragraph, but of course, St. Thomas Aquinas wants to give us more than he has to give, but it is still very interesting. All right, so he says whether theologians should take note of the circumstances of human acts. I find it interesting that he talks about theologians. I haven't heard him use this term yet in the Summa. Maybe he has, but certainly not in a title of an article. And he says circumstances come under the consideration of the theologian for a threefold reason. First, because the theologian considers human acts inasmuch as man is thereby directed to happiness, as I mentioned a moment ago. Now, everything that is directed to an end should be proportionate to that end, but acts are made proportionate to an end by means of a certain commensurateness which results from the due circumstances. Hence, the theologian has to consider the circumstances, Secondly, because the theologian considers human acts according as they are found to be good or evil, better or worse, and this diversity depends on circumstances, as we shall see further on. Thirdly, because the theologian considers human acts under the aspect of merit and demerit, which is proper to human acts, and for this reason it is requisite that they be voluntary. Now, a human act is deemed to be voluntary or involuntary according to knowledge or ignorance of circumstances. Therefore, the theologian has to consider circumstances. Okay, this is very important because I always use the example of a woman walking into Planned Parenthood and whether is she sinning or not. And I ask my students that I teach, and they'll say, well, you got, why is she walking in? Maybe she's going in to evangelize. Maybe she's going in to, drop off some pamphlets about pro-life. So we don't know the circumstances of an action, but when we do know them, we're better able to tell whether or not it's a moral act or not. Article 3, whether the circumstances are properly set forth in the third book of Ethics. Okay, so this picture here is Aristotle because he wrote Ethics, and I find it interesting because, most of us have read some philosophy, and we've read Aristotle and Plato, but here's the really the greatest mind that the Catholic Church has ever produced, talking about one of the greatest minds in the history of philosophy, in Aristotle. So it's interesting to see the two of these come together. And he said, first of all, totally in his rhetoric, give 7 circumstances which are contained in this verse. He gives the Latin, so I'll go ahead and read the Latin because it's here. Quis, quid, ubi, quibus, auxilius, cur, commando, quando. Okay, not sure if I pronounce those right. Which are who, what, where, by what aids, why, how, and when. For in acts we must take note of who did it, by what aids or instruments he did it, what he did, where he did it, why he did it, how and when he did it. But Aristotle in Ethics 3:1 adds yet another about what, which totally includes in the circumstance what. Okay, so he's kind of basically Aristotle and Tolle are in agreement. The reason of this enumeration may be set down as follows. For a circumstance is described as something outside the substance of the act, and yet in a way touching it. Now this happens in 3 ways. First, inasmuch as it touches the act itself. Secondly, inasmuch as it touches the cause of the act. Thirdly, inasmuch as it touches the effect. It touches the act itself either by way of measure, as time and place, or by qualifying the act as the mode of acting. It touches the effect when we consider what is done. It touches the cause of the act as to the final cause by the circumstance why. Remember, final cause is the purpose or why something is done. What is the end, right? As to the material cause or object in the circumstance about what, as to the principal efficient cause in the circumstance who, and as to the instrumental efficient cause in the circumstance by what aids. Okay, so he really, explains this thoroughly, bringing in Aristotle's causes and also like I said, the agreement between Tolle and Aristotle in this. All right, the final article is whether the most important circumstances are why and in what the act consists. He says, acts are properly called human inasmuch as they are voluntary. Now the motive and object of the will is the end. Therefore, that circumstance is most important of all, which touches the act on the part of the end. The circumstance why, and the second is in importance, is that which touches the very substance of the act, the circumstance what he did. As to the other circumstances, they are more or less important according as they are more or less approach to these. Okay, so what happened and why did they do it? Okay, so somebody robs a bank. Okay, what did they do? They robbed a bank. Why did they do it? They're trying to get money for their child who needs an operation or else they're going to die. Well, that circumstance may change people's opinion a little bit and may change the culpability a little bit, so you got to understand the circumstances. All right, that brings us to an end of question 7 of the treatise on human acts, acts peculiar to man, of the circumstances of human acts. We'll move on to question 8 tomorrow. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the Summa, one question at a time. God bless you.